The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before I hand over the floor to the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to continue his line of questioning, the Chamber wishes to inquire the other defense teams whether or not you have already discussed with each other in relation to the time allocation for questioning. Can you please advise the court? Mr. Jasper Bow, have you consulted with the other two defense teams in relation to the questions and time allocation to put questions to the witness at question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, I have. The last information I have is that the Ieng Sary team would need no more than 10 minutes, and the Khieu Samphan team would need no time. I am looking at my colleagues. Is that an accurate statement? So I think and I hope that we can finish the witness today.
The President, thank you. How about the defense team for Mr. Ieng Sary? Do you have any observation to make in relation to the time allocation?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think 10 minutes would be enough. 10 minutes for today.
President, thank you. How about the defense team for Mr. Khieu Samphan? Counsel Kung Samon. Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President, but our team do not have any questions to put to this witness. The President, thank you. Counsel Jasper Pau, you may continue your line of questionings now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Sumchea, you have already testified today that you are not allowed to walk freely or contact anyone else other than the people in your unit. And you mentioned that there were strict regulations. Do you know what would happen to soldiers if they would try to enter areas of Phnom Penh that were occupied by the other zones, in your case the eastern zone or the southwestern zones?
At the time, those who dare do that, they would run the risk of mysterious disappearance. Even the soldiers within the same site, they would not be allowed to go to other places arbitrarily.
And did you ever hear about fights that took place between soldiers from the different zones?
No, I didn't. I never heard of the soldiers in the same side fighting against each other.
And let me rephrase that question. Did your unit ever encounter soldiers from the other zones that tried to enter into the area that you were guarding?
I do not really understand the question.
I will try to rephrase. Just now you stated that soldiers that would cross into the other zones would run the risk of disappearing. My question to you is, did your unit ever encounter soldiers of the other zones, the East Zone or the Southwest Zone, that had entered the area that you were guarding?
No, I never saw any clash of the soldiers, but there was a general instruction of prohibition of crossing from one section or one zone to another zone. That was the prohibition handed down at that time.
Mr. President, I would like to read to the witness excerpt from the document E3/1568. It is a statement by Mr. Heng Samrin given in the interview with Ben Kiernan, and the English ERN is 00651879. Khmer ERN is 00713947, and French ERN is 00743351, and it deals with this issue.
The President. This issue has already been ruled upon by the Chamber. Parties are not granted leave to extract a portion of the interview by another witness to put to the witness at issue. But you can ask the witness of his personal experience with which he has come across, and then the witness has the prerogative to make any statement in relation to that question. Then this issue has already been ruled upon, and it is repetitious, and it is not subject to any overrule.
Mr. President, I think this is a different situation because this is not a witness that has been heard by the OCIJ. It is a statement that is contained in a document upon which the prosecution wants to rely as evidence. I simply want to confront this witness with this piece of evidence. It is purely a straightforward impeachment technique, and this witness can testify to this excerpt. So the rule that you refer to does not seem to apply.
The issue was ruled upon on the 25th of October 2012. You may refer to this particular ruling in the transcript on this same issue. So you are not granted leave to proceed in this manner. You may not extract the testimony of any other witnesses to put the question to the witness at issue.
Mr. President, I hate to belabor the point, but the problem is that we risk our opportunity to question this witness if this issue is not resolved. I also remember a ruling by Judge Cartwright several months ago in which she stated that it is indeed appropriate to quote from witnesses' testimony as long as you remain, or one remains anonymous, as long as the name of the witness is not revealed. That is valid when it goes to OCIJ witnesses. This witness, as far as we know, will never be called before the trial chamber. This might, of course, change, and then perhaps different rules would apply. But in the past, the OCP and the defense have quoted from statements by witnesses. So I think our question would be what has changed. And this particular witness contradicts, Mr. Heng Samrin's statement contradicts on important parts the statement by this witness. We cannot effectively impeach or question this witness if we cannot use statements like these that are simply part of the body of evidence before your chamber.
The President, International Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Just quickly, the court has made clear that counsel can ask questions relating to the underlying content of that. Whatever Heng Samrin may have said or not said does not impeach this witness. That is simply a false proposition. The court has made very clear that you are entitled to ask about the substance of the matter, but unless there is a direct connection to this witness, that is what, and our position was, I read through the transcript from the other day, we made very clear our objection to the use of this document is unless you can establish a direct nexus to the witness. It's hard to conceive how that could be given Heng Samrin's position in the East Zone. So I think it's incorrect to assert also that the prosecution has offered to agree to the admission of this document. You, the Nuon Chea defense, have objected to the admission of this document. We've offered to resolve the issue by agreeing to that, and you have not taken us up on that. So to suggest that we would use this document for any purpose is incorrect, and the position we made very clear is that you need to show a nexus to this witness in order to use a document like this.
Very briefly, Mr. President, in order to show a nexus, I will have to read the parts of the document that I want to read to show that Mr. Heng Samrin is testifying as to issues that this witness testifies to. So we cannot have this debate in the abstract. If we need to go into closed session outside of the presence of the witness, that is perhaps necessary. But we submit that Heng Samrin's testimony is relevant in light of the testimony of this witness.
Mr. President, Counsel Jasper Pau, the Chamber has ruled so far that the Council must not extract any portion of the witness interview of other witnesses as the basis to put the questions to the witness before the Chamber. But by reading those witness statements, you can get the overview of the information, and then you can put the general questions to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand that I cannot quote from the statements by Mr. Heng Samrin. I will move on to a related topic, and I will try to paraphrase. I guess that's the order that I'm under. It's a new topic, but related. So, Mr. Sumchea, you have stated that the Eastern Zone forces were the harshest. Other sources would state that the Eastern Zone forces were generally much better behaved and much better organized. Did you ever hear statements to that extent, that the Eastern Zone forces were much better behaved and much more organized?
I overheard from others that the Eastern forces were strong, but actually it was not necessarily true. Forces from the northern zones were also strong, and from other zones as well, they were equally strong, but the only difference is that people employ different means and methods in order to evacuate people out of the city. For example, soldiers and forces from the northern zones would employ a much softer approach to evacuate people out of the city as opposed to forces from the eastern zone.
I'm not sure that I understood your last answer, so I will ask one follow-up question. Was it your understanding that the northern zone forces were less harsh than the eastern zone forces?
Response. I'm afraid I don't get your question. The President. Counsel, please repeat or rephrase your question, and please be reminded that you should try not to make a witness speculate when responding to your question.
Mr. Witness, I will try to repeat in slightly more straightforward fashion. Was it your understanding that the northern zone forces were less harsh than the Eastern Zone forces?
Response. These forces were firm but gentle and ethical.
And when you speak about these forces, you speak about the Northern Zone forces. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is.
But it is also correct that you never entered into the Eastern Zone area, the zone that was controlled by the Eastern Zone forces. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is.
Is it also correct that everything you know about the conduct of the Eastern Zone forces is based on hearsay, because you heard other people talk about it?
Response. Yes, it is correct. I heard this only from people within my squad.
Is any of the people that told you about the Eastern Zone's behavior still alive?
Response. They all died.
I move on to a next topic, and that's the loudspeakers that you spoke about. And according to your statement before the OCIJ, those loudspeakers were set up 7 days after the liberation of Phnom Penh. Is that correct? Were they set up 7 days after the liberation of Phnom Penh?
Response. I don't know about this. In my unit, there was no such loudspeaker. Which loudspeakers are you referring to now?
Just to be clear, I will read from your OCIJ statement, and it's on English, ERN 00223346, and Khmer ERN 00205058. And the question is, afterwards, what else did they do after the people were gone from the city? And your answer is, after 7 or 8 days, they set up loudspeakers and broadcast to the Lon Nol soldiers, saying for anyone of whatever rank who had worked anywhere to go back to their duty stations, although previously they had been only ordinary subordinate soldiers. End of quote. So, Mr. Witness, you state that they set up loudspeakers after 7 or 8 days. That's your testimony before the OCIJ. Was that a correct statement, that they set up these loudspeakers after 7 or 8 days?
Response. Yes, it was Gun who talked about this and who said out loud on the loudspeakers, telling other people to come forward to work in Phnom Penh.
And to be clear, did you personally ever hear any of the broadcasts? Did you hear any of the transmissions over these loudspeakers?
Response. No, I didn't.
So you only know about it because Kuhn told you about them. Is that correct?
Response. Yes.
And to get back to the other question I asked, you stated before the OCIJ that these loudspeakers were set up after 7 or 8 days after the liberation of Phnom Penh. Was that a correct statement? Were they indeed set up 7 to 8 days after the liberation of Phnom Penh?
Response. I don't know, and I did not hear the radio broadcast on the loudspeakers. I only heard through Kuhn, who told me about messages were broadcast on radios, and on loudspeakers rather, and I did not remember having heard any such announcements on loudspeakers in Phnom Penh when I was there, and I did not hear any such thing on loudspeakers during those days. And I also heard just from Kuhn concerning the radio, transmission through loudspeakers that people were arrested along the road. So I have no knowledge of this.
Thank you for clarifying that, because if one were to read just your answer that you gave to the OCIJ, it would seem that you were actually present and heard those loudspeakers being used. But the question remains, why did you testify to the OCIJ that they set up these loudspeakers after 7 or 8 days? Can you give us an explanation for your testimony before the OCIJ that these loudspeakers were set up after 7 or 8 days?
Response. I heard from Kuhn that he would be going out with the loudspeakers to try to appeal to people to come forward. I never saw loudspeakers being set up. I never saw any trucks loading people with loudspeakers. I only heard what being said about the loudspeakers through Kuhn.
Thank you. That is clear. As far as you know, when these loudspeakers were deployed 7 or 8 days after the liberation of Phnom Penh, were there still Lon Nol soldiers in the city? Were they still in hiding, perhaps?
Response. As I stated this morning, there was none of them. Phnom Penh was cleared. No civilian, no soldier, no single soul.
Thank you. Then I will move to my almost last topic, and that is the following. Did you ever hear people talk about a radio broadcast that had been distributed 2 days before the liberation of Phnom Penh? And that radio broadcast ordered all military surgeons and physicians and medical students to report to the medical reception center at the Olympic Sports Stadium. Did you ever hear of such a broadcast?
Response. No, I didn't. But I heard broadcast in the form of songs. Songs played on air. And every morning I would hear the songs.
Thank you. I sincerely hope I do not violate the court's ruling here, but I will try to paraphrase as I've understood your instructions to be, Mr. President. Mr. Heng Samrin has testified about the Eastern Zone forces in Phnom Penh. And according to him, the uniforms of the Eastern Zone forces were distinct. They were either khaki or camouflage uniforms, as opposed to the black uniforms that were worn by the other Khmer Rouge soldiers. Did you ever see soldiers in Phnom Penh that were wearing different outfits, such as khaki uniforms or camouflage uniforms?
Response. At the beginning, people wore only black clothes, but after capturing any kind of enemy's barracks, then the soldiers could make use of the war spoils, like uniforms of the enemy, and they could wear them whatever they liked.
Thank you. And also, according to Mr. Heng Samrin, the Eastern Zone forces did occupy an area also up to Wat Phnom, which would contradict your earlier statement that it was only the northern forces guarding that area. Does that refresh your memory? Is it possible that you saw Eastern Zone forces around Wat Phnom?
Response. No, I didn't. Not at all. Because the head of the division, Mr. Woon, was at that location, and the East Zone's people were there, so I couldn't see them. Hack, the head of the battalion, talked to us about how the city was classified into sections where different groups of soldiers would be tasked with protecting each respective section.
You have talked about this a little bit, but could you tell us a little bit more about what Hak told you about the division of the city?
Response. Hak was the head of the battalion. He was not the commander of division. You can imagine how many divisions there were in each zone, because I can see that only for the north zone there were at least 3 to 4 divisions of soldiers already.
And do you know how many divisions the other zones had?
Response. I don't know, but there must be at least 3 divisions. It's my estimation, because I could see that at least there were a few or 3 to 4 divisions from each zone conquering Phnom Penh at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Sumchea. For now, those are all my questions. I think it's also an appropriate moment to set the record straight on something I said 2 weeks ago. I claimed in court that Heng Samrin had been a division commander during the evacuation of Phnom Penh. I must say that the more accurate title is, according to himself, Deputy President of the Front Committee of Region 25. And this Front Committee would later be called Division 1 of the Eastern Zone. So it would be more accurate to describe Heng Samrin as the Deputy Division Commander. And only after the evacuation of Phnom Penh did he become Division Commander and Deputy Chief of Staff of the East Zone Forces and a member of the Zone Committee. And this can be found, just for the record, in document E3 1568, English ERN 00651878, and Khmer ERN 00713945, and the English ERN for the second portion is 00651886, and the Khmer ERN is 00743358. My apologies for that oversight, but that statement, that interview by Ben Kieran is not always easy to digest in terms of chronology. Of course, it remains a fact that we submit that Mr. Heng Samrin would be an exceptional witness to testify on the conditions during the evacuation of Phnom Penh in that zone that was occupied by the Eastern forces. We've seen it again today. This witness simply does not know what went on in the Eastern zone. It was a general prohibition of crossing into other zones. He was not allowed to walk freely, and he was confined to his small location, his limited location near Calmette Hospital and the French Embassy. So that for the record. And on behalf of my colleague Mr. Soonarun and myself, I thank you very much for coming today, Mr. Sumchea. I believe that Mr. Carnavas has a few more follow-up questions.
The President, Counsel for Mr. Ingsari, you may now proceed to put questions to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone in and around the courtroom. Good afternoon, sir. Along with Mr. Angodom, I represent Mr. Youngsari. I have a few questions. First of all, this morning you indicated to the President, when he asked you how many statements you gave, you indicated 2. We only see 1. Only 1 was presented to you by the prosecution and was in fact referenced as only 1. Can you please tell us when you had the second interview?
Response. I'm afraid I don't remember the date of that interview.
All right. Let's see if we can work together and figure this out. The folks that interviewed you that one time when we don't have the statement, do you recall where they were from?
Response. During the first interview, there was some kind of document, but during the second session, I did not receive any document, and there was some American people who came to interview me at Kampong Chnang. They waited for me there.
All right. And were those people the same people that came back to interview you the second time? Or from the same organization? For the lawyer to...
The President witness, please wait until you understand the question before you proceed to respond to it. If you do not understand the question, ask counsel to repeat. You are not allowed to consult with your jury counsel during the time of questioning unless your response may lead to the nature of self-incrimination. So please be very careful and listen to the question. I believe that witness appears to have forgotten your current question. Could you repeat it?
Gladly, Mr. President. Witness, you've told us that during the first interview, someone or some people came, one may have been an American, showing you documents and asking questions. Were they the same people that came the second time when they interviewed you?
Response. They were different people.
Thank you. Now, were they from the same organization, that is, from this tribunal that came and visited you in Kampong Chnang?
Response. I was told that the documents were brought from this court, and with that document, that's why the American knew where I live and found me.
All right. And could you please tell us whether they identified themselves? Did they tell us as to where they come from, what the purpose of the interview was?
Response. I was only told that they were from the Khmer Tribunal, and again, later on, I was met by an American, and they also brought along my document.
Thank you. Now, sir, could you please tell us how long that interview took place? I see there's an objection. I'm sure it'll be interesting.
The President, witness, please hold on. Counsel for the civil parties, you may proceed. Counsel Tisrina. Thank you, Mr. President, and Your Honors. I would like to make some observations concerning the approach in putting question to the witness. I have noted that the questions are not within the facts at issue. The questions could have been relevant to the facts listed in the closing order or the segment of case file 002/01. In the contrary, Mr. Kanawaz was putting questions concerning the procedures in investigation, so may he be advised to be straightforward to the facts at issue rather than to that particular area.
Allow me, Mr. President, to respond.
The President, Counsel Kanawaz, could you please hold on because the co-prosecutor is on his feet. He may proceed. So it is too bad that only when another person was on her feet and that the counsel would proceed to also maybe lodge an objection. However, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. Our position is that the defense should have a limited scope to ask questions on this issue. My only objection is that counsel should be very clear as to which interviews he's asking about. I think it's still unclear whether it was the first or second interview was the interview that was recorded, and I think his questions are somewhat confusing at this point because he has yet to really clarify that. But if he proceeds in that manner, we do not have any objection to him asking questions on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may respond, first of all, I'll make sure that I'm abundantly clear as to which statement I'm referring to. Second of all, let me address the civil party lawyer who stood up. First of all, it was you, Mr. President, that elicited from the gentleman that he gave two statements. It was the prosecutor, the national prosecutor, who stood up and only showed one statement. In our disclosure material, we only have one statement. We've heard testimony from the witness throughout the day where essentially the witness has come full circle, more or less admitting that what he's saying is pure hearsay, that virtually he witnessed very little, if any. Now, I'm entitled to explore this. Why? Because it goes to his credibility. It goes to the weight that you wish to give his testimony. Now, if the gentleman was interviewed first by investigators of the Office of the Core Investigative Judges, without being tape recorded, without being mentioned anywhere in their summary, and also produced documents and showed the documents to the witness and went over those documents with the witness, might that have been a way of coaching the witness, refreshing the witness, creating a memory in the witness? Might that in any way taint his entire testimony, let alone the process itself, which is, and I'm not going, and I know that under the French system this would be called a nullity. I'm not going for that. What I'm talking about is an inappropriate manner in which an investigation took place with this gentleman, which may have tainted his testimony. And I should be within my rights to question on this because, after all, it was you, Mr. President, who asked the witness how many times he was interviewed. And we are very grateful for you asking the question, and extremely grateful for the gentleman being honest with us. And I'm also grateful to the prosecutor who recognizes the merit of my questioning, albeit he seems to be rather confused as to where I'm going And I'm going to clarify as to which statement I'm referring to and when the documents were shown to him. Thank you.
The President, Counsel Kanawaz, please repeat your question. And indeed, questions are aimed at or were meant to ask a witness for some responses for different purposes. The Chamber allows counsel to proceed with the questions first, and the question should be precise. For example, about the interview. For example, if the interviews were conducted 2 times, then you would ask the witness, when was the first interview conducted, and when was the second one conducted, and who interviewed him on the first interview, and second and third and fourth. Because please be more gentle and be precise to this kind of question, because the witness already indicated that he reads and writes Khmer very little.
Thank you for your guidance, Mr. President. Witness, if we can focus now on the 2 interviews. Do you recall whether it was the first interview or the second interview when you were recorded?
It was during the first interview.
All right. And when was it that documents were shown to you? The first interview or the second interview?
It was in the first interview.
How long did the interviews last? The first one and then the second one?
The first interview lasted for approximately half an hour. And the questions that they put in relation to the in one document, that document belonged to me. But in the second interview, it lasted for approximately 10 minutes. But they did ask me about a different subject matter.
Now, let's focus a little bit on your testimony here today. And I want to clarify one point that was raised earlier. Do you recall when exactly you went to the French embassy after the fall of Phnom Penh? What date was that?
It was in 1975. We entered Phnom Penh in 1975. And my unit was stationed there.
How many days after the fall of Phnom Penh were you stationed there? First day, second day, third day, can you please tell us?
It was around the 3rd day, and then our group was stationed there.
All right. Now, and it's your testimony that by the 3rd day, by the time you got there, the entire embassy was empty. That's your testimony from your recollection. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it was on the 3rd day that you actually went into the embassy to check it out, to make sure nobody was there. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
All right. Now, we're going to switch to something else because you talked a lot about killings. Can you please tell us how many times were you involved in killing Lanol soldiers that had waved the white flag or had surrendered?
No, we never killed anyone, but Kun, who was the one who actually announced through loudspeaker that the Lon soldier surrendered and submitted to us, and then they were eventually killed.
And how many times did you witness the killings of the Lanol soldiers that had given up?
I never witnessed the killing, but I only heard it from Kun. Kun was in a unit attached to my unit as well.
All right. So he told you, but you didn't see it. That's your testimony.
Yes, it is.
And so much of what you told us today is based on what others told you and not what you actually saw or participated in. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is. President, witness, please hold on. The prosecutor, you may proceed.
My objection is just to the extent that Mr. Carnivus is slightly overstating, to the extent he's referring to the issue related to the executions of the Lanol soldiers. The witness has been clear since the start that was based on information from Kun. To the extent he's trying now to extend that to all of the witnesses' testimony, he's being argumentative and misstating the evidence.
Mr. President, I believe we have an answer from the witness. We do have a confirmation that he was at the French embassy 3 days after Phnom Penh fell, and to his observations, personal activity, there was no one there. So that we have a confirmation. As to everything else, it would appear that the gentleman has indicated that he heard but didn't participate and didn't actually see. And with that, I think there's no further need for me to question the gentleman. I wish to thank him and wish him a good journey back home. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The President, thank you. How about the defense team for Mr. Keo Sampon? You stated earlier that you did not intend to put any questions to the witness. Do you have anything to make? Counsel Kong Samon. Thank you, Mr. President. We do not have any question. The President, thank you. Mr. Sumjia, your testimony has come to an end now, and you may now be released. You can go back home or to any destination you wish to go. And the chamber wishes to thank you very much for spending your valuable time to provide testimony before the chamber for the whole day. And I know that you have made every effort to respond to all the questions posed by all the parties involved, and your testimony will significantly contribute to ascertaining the truth in the case, and we wish you the best of luck and a safe journey back home. Security court officer is instructed to coordinate with the vessel unit to facilitate the return of the witness to his home. And please also arrange the transport back home for TCCP 89 as well, and have him back to this courtroom before 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And the time is now appropriate for the day adjournment. And the chamber will resume tomorrow on the 6th of November 2012, and tomorrow the chamber will hear the testimony of TCCP 89, and the first party to put the question to the civil party is the civil party lawyers. Security guards are now instructed to bring the co-accused to the detention facility of the ECCC and have them back to this courtroom before 9. The court is now adjourned.